IVM.
Hi, I'm Satyajit.
Hi, I'm Racheta.
Welcome to Paperback by the Open Library Project.
We have as our guest today Anand Sivakumaran, author of Natasha Mehra Must Die. In this episode, we deep dive into his book, what inspired him to write, and his podcast series, Croc's Tales.
In the second half, we also discuss Freedom at Midnight by Larry Dominique, O Jerusalem by Larry Collins Dominique Lapierre, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, and The Other Guy Blinked, How Pepsi Won the Cola Wars by Jesse Kornbluth and Roger Enrico.
Anand discusses the story of humanity from appointment of the last Viceroy of India to assassination of Gandhi, the history of Jews and Turks, the habits that make him highly effective, and the long since existing Cola Wars.
Natasha Mehra Must Die by Anand Sivakumaran is available on Amazon, Kindle, and wherever books are sold.
I'm never going to get to kiss Patrick Walters. That is the only thought that ran through her head as the lifeblood gushed out of her stomach. A rather strange thing to think about while being chased by a gunman who'd already put 1 bullet into her body and by the sound of it wanted to implant a few more. She couldn't help it though. Her mind had disconnected from her reality even as her body did all that it could to help her stay alive. Her arms were tightly clenched around her stomach, trying to stem the flow of the crimson liquid that seemed so eager to stain the school hallway. She was staggering towards an empty classroom, hoping to find some sanctuary, praying that the killer wouldn't head in her direction. There was a whole school full of kids. Surely he could find some other prey. And he would have. Had he been just another depressed, deranged high school shooter, finding a vent for his inadequacies through the barrel of an all-too-easily available semi-automatic rifle. But he wasn't. This wasn't another Parkland or Columbine or Stoneman Douglas. And she wasn't just an Asian casualty in an American cliché. She was the target. The 12 other students and the 2 teachers who had bitten the bullet so far were collateral damage. Slaughtered only to make the whole thing look like every other high school shooting, as opposed to it being part of a global conspiracy. But the 14-year-old had no idea about this, as she painfully endeavored to yank her wounded body as far away from the door as possible. Every step seemed so hard. It would be so easy to just crumple down, to let sleep take over. But no, she couldn't give up. But for all her force of will, she just didn't have the strength to get that far. She made it till the 3rd row, then crashed to the ground, propelling her body underneath a desk with the last of her strength. Her breath came in painful rasps. She hoped he wouldn't come to this door and wouldn't see her even if he did. The sound of the door opening dashed her first hope. She held her breath, stilled her body into silence in a last futile attempt at stopping him from finding her. The clickety-clack of his footsteps coming closer told her it hadn't worked. In the meager seconds before he walked to a hiding place, her final thoughts were that since she was never going to make it to the prom, she could have had that second helping of jalebis for breakfast. The second bullet shattered her spine. The third exploded in her left auricle and was the one that ended her short, uneventful life. Natasha Mehra would never know that she was the last victim in the international leg of this pogrom. One that would now move to its final destination, the birthplace of this entire plot, India.
Thank you, Anand Sivakumaran. That was an excerpt from his book, Natasha Mehra Must Die. Welcome to Paperback by the Open Library Project. I am your co-host Satyajit, otherwise known as Onion Knight in most food circles. I'm hosting this podcast with my co-founder at the Open Library Project, Racheta Sharma.
Hi guys, my name is Racheta and I'm an ex-banker who left my banking profession to follow my passion and run libraries across the world. The Open Library Project is a non-fiction book library service offered to businesses on a subscription basis. We're trying to move away from the run-of-the-mill library concept and setting up rotational and locational curated libraries at co-working spaces, corporates and business incubators. The idea here is to create value, build a knowledge community and encourage a growth mindset amongst our members.
Today we have with us on the show Anand Sivakumaran. Anand Sivakumaran is a writer-director based in India. He began his life as a chemical engineer from IIT Mumbai before a drastic career change. After dabbling with advertising, journalism and event management, he ended up working in Mumbai's television and film industry as a writer and director. Anand Sivakumaran is the founder of the creative collective Crocktails. The company creates and works as showrunner on web series and also does scripts for film and television. Welcome to the show, Anand.
Hi.
It's great to have you. Yeah. So the excerpt that we read from that you read is from your debut novel, right?
Yes.
So how was that process? So you've now even transitioned from being a film and television director into now becoming an author.
Actually, the original plan was to do this first and do all of that later.
Right.
Life somehow played it exactly opposite.
So tell us about your journey. How did this happen? How did you make the shift from film and television and into writing a novel?
Yeah.
Okay. So I've been trying to write novels for a long time. I mean, the entire length of the time I was writing for TV and directing and all that stuff, I've worked on books. The discipline wasn't there. Okay, so the thing was missing. I'd write and then stop and write and stop, and then there'd be some deadlines or meetings or shoots, and the books would go down the drain.
Right.
Then there was a period of time when I was actually... life was changing. Okay, so I'd gone through a divorce. I'd taken a break from a lot of writing and directing work. I was just sort of summing up what I wanted to do, and I just felt like writing. And strangely, this story came to me. And I just got into the discipline of writing every day. And in pretty much no time, the first draft was done, and that's how it had really happened.
So you have mentioned a lot of history books that you've recommended as books that you really enjoy. So how come this fiction book, and what inspired you to write Natasha Mehra?
Fundamentally, I've always been somebody who tells stories. So it's always, and maybe like as a kid, it was my escape. Life was damn boring, so one made up stories and one read stories. So that's where my interest has always been. But a lot of reality. Especially non-fiction or even real movies, tell far more exciting stories. Life, I think, has the most exciting and the most unpredictable, stunning stories.
Fact is stranger than fiction.
Fact is stranger, fact is more astounding, fact is wickeder. So, writers like me and everyone else, we think we're very creative and can come up with these things. We are amateurs compared to people above. The gods or deities or fates sitting there, the scripts they are coming up with are unbelievable. So, I mean, there's no better place for... So somewhere, what I try also, most of my scripts or even the books, you pick up from reality. You take elements. Like the excerpt which we read. Now, that's like a lot of high school shootings one reads about. Here, one has given it a different slant, so it's not a typical. There's more to it. There's a larger conspiracy and all. But it's rooted in reality. So... yeah, I mean, so a lot of and history is something I've always enjoyed. History and mythology were things I've enjoyed even as a child. So somewhere elements of it, I guess, creep into my stories. So, which is why, like the list of books I read also, you'll find a lot of history there.
That's exactly.
So Anand, tell us about the book.
So the book at surface is just another thriller. So, but with a very quirky thing that somebody or somebody's, they're killing off every girl, woman with the name Natasha Mehra. So it could seem like the work of a madman. It could seem like a serial killer who's just randomly picked on this. But what you discover, or what our main protagonist, who's also a Natasha Mehra, discovers, that this is not happening in one city. This is happening across cities, across countries. It's almost global. And of course, she has no clue why it's happening or what's going on. But ultimately, in an effort to save herself, she tries to band together with other surviving Natasha Mehras. And they try and figure who's after them and why. And the answer is completely horrific. And as we find out probably towards the end of the story, is rooted somewhere in mythology. And the mythology... Of course, there are parts of it which are Indian mythology. But it's got resonance in Norse mythology, in biblical mythology, in Islamic mythology, because the concept of doomsday stretches across mythologies.
Across mythologies is common.
Which is why this is part one of the Doomsday trilogy. So somewhere the doomsday idea is connected with what's going on. What, how...
That we'll figure out once we read the book.
Read the book. I'm not telling more. I want people to get the book, read it.
Yeah, it sounds very gripping and definitely a must read.
Thank you. I hope so.
So Anand, tell us about Cocktails. How did that come about? And so you've been doing podcasts for a while, I think.
You're talking about Cocktails the company or Cocktails the podcast?
Cocktails.
Because I seem to like the name so much I use it everywhere. Okay, Cocktails
Let's talk
the
about
podcast.
both of them. Yeah.
So I've been doing this thing for a while, which is basically, it started out at parties, and I must admit that parties where there was a certain amount of alcohol consumed.
The best parties.
The best parties. So what I would do is it started as a party game that is ask somebody, okay, give me a word, give me a line, and I'd come up with a story then and there with that person as the hero, heroine, or whatever.
Right.
And people said, you know what, you need to take it out, do it as a show. So I did a few live events. And then I heard about IVM and had a chat with Amit, etc.
Right.
And we came up with the idea that this could become a podcast.
Okay.
So, but the flip in the podcast is that it's one story which carries over 4 episodes. But each episode, though it's the same story, starts with a different prompt, which come from listeners and people like that.
Okay, and then you carry on
and
the
then
story.
you start with a different prompt, but you connect it back to the original story and
lovely.
so on and so forth.
So it's completely improv. You just make it up on the spot.
No, the podcast is not completely improv. It's improv when I work it out.
Okay.
And then I sort of
final
perform it here.
Yeah. Okay.
It's something similar to what we had done with the 91 Springboard, where we had done the storytelling. So we had a guest on board who was called Anupam Siddhant. He's a slam poet. So he had done a similar thing with
Poetry,
all the people.
Poetry, he got the audience
where you
involved,
use one line and then everybody keeps continuing the story. Yeah.
So this used to be a game actually way back in life where we used to call it Tell a Tale.
Okay.
So two partners.
And
each person tells a story for about 10 seconds and then it flips and you keep continuing the story.
And still get a connect.
Yeah. So I do these live shows at different venues like The Hive and Social and stuff like that. So all the stories are improv based on people there, and I never know what the story is going to be. So I also apologize to everyone and say, the story, because you're the protagonist, it could take you into strange places.
So you need to be comfortable with going to the strange place.
I am not responsible for it. So we did this one a few weeks ago, and he'd given dusk as a word.
Okay.
And for some reason I came up with a story where this is somebody who, whenever it's dusk, needs to go to the loo and keep peeing. And no, that's not the funny part. The funny part is that his girlfriend stood up and put her hands together and said, "How did you know?"
Oh my God.
And I was like, I didn't know. So that is really surreal. I mean,
that's how fact is stranger than fiction.
Fact is stranger than fiction.
There.
I mean, so it seems this guy actually goes off into the loo and doesn't come back for really long.
Okay.
True story. There are witnesses.
Wow, it sounds fascinating. We'd love to attend one of your workshops or these events. Sounds like a real fun evening.
It is. They become really fun. They become very mad, but they're fun.
So as a writer, what would be the books that you would recommend people for 2019? Have you made a book list of...
No, I'm not a very planned, organized person. Everything I do is pretty instinctive. So it's like what happens is one just scars lists, like the New York bestseller list, or somebody's mentioned something on one of the reading circles, and then the synopsis or the lines sound interesting, so I pick up and read. So
it's more mood based.
It's more mood. It's actually a lot of it is mood based, because sometimes you're in the mood for a thriller. Sometimes you want to read something that's light and fun.
That's true.
Sometimes you want to read something completely nonsensical. And very often, sometimes I just want to go back and read something I've read
before
a lot of times before. You won't believe it, but I do go back and read a lot of Enid Blytons.
Oh, wow.
They're actually very relaxing to just go back to and read all over again, especially the Five Find Outers, Famous Five kind of
Secret
stuff.
7 and all.
Yeah, it's just like nice to just go back there.
Yeah.
Right. That's very fascinating. I think as a reading habit, maybe to relax your mind, you can read what you used to read as a child. These novels which are in our mind, right? They're with us.
And Wodehouse. I love going back to Wodehouse.
It's so crazy because a lot of times people donate books to us, and we got a series of childcraft books.
Oh, okay.
And this is something everybody is read in their childhood, and when I went through it again, and I was like, wow, there were some facts which I still didn't know about certain animals. And I was like, they're so informative and fun. You can Like just
No, you were talking about my interest in history.
Yeah.
So my interest in history came from Amar Chitrakatha.
Right.
And mythology came from pretty much Chanda Mama and stuff like that. So that's how it starts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how it's grown into. You have it's apparent in your book, right? The historical and mythological references.
Yeah.
Amazing. So on that note, we're going to take a short break and we'll be back after this.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a great week on IVM Podcast. If you're not following us on social media, please make sure you do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We launched our listener survey last week, and we'd like you to really participate in that if you haven't already. We're offering a free mug for a few select winners if you fill out the survey and give us your email address. So go to the website ivmpodcast.com/survey, and there's a link over there to filling out the survey. Please do, and we'd really appreciate that. On Cyrus Says, Cyrus's guest is policy professional Meghnad S. Meghnad sheds light on working with parliamentarians, some trivia about our laws, and his new podcast, How to Citizen. On How to Citizen, we're on Chapter 6, Understanding Our Criminal Justice System. The guest for the episode is comedian Aishwarya Mohanraj. The host and Aishwarya ponder the inequalities of justice and what would be a way to put it right. On Simplified, Chuck and Shrike take another look at Brexit and the predicaments in store for the UK in March. On Pulyabazi, the hosts are in conversation with Dr. Alok Shukla, who served as Deputy Election Commissioner to investigate the Indian electoral process. On the Habit Coach podcast, Ashton talks about how the technique of box breathing helps fight anxiety. And with that, let's continue with your show.
Welcome back to the show. We still have with us Anand Sivakumaran, author of Natasha Mehra Must Die.
With apologies to all Natasha Mehras out there. I have no idea why I chose your name, but I just did.
They got famous.
Well.
So we're going to talk about Freedom at Midnight by Dominique, Lapierre and Larry Collins. So Anand, what about this book? Tell us about this book and what about it stood out for you?
The funny thing was that I'll tell you the real story of how I picked up this book.
Okay.
So I've grown up in railway colonies all my life, and every colony had a library.
Right.
Okay, and those days I was mainly interested in fiction, except that all the books the library had, I had read.
Right.
And this book was there, and initially I looked at it and said, come on, Indian history, I'm anyway doing that in school.
In school, you're learning
don't need to.
Right.
But it seemed interesting.
Right.
And once I started reading, I just couldn't stop. Okay. Because, these authors, then I ended up reading all the books they've written. They take off on history, but they've researched it so much that the smallest, there's so many stories. For no matter how much history you've read, you have no clue. There's so many small stories within every aspect.
Right.
We hear the big things. We hear about,
the macro of the whole
Dandi
situation.
March and this and that and partition.
But there must have been so many nuanced things happening.
All the stories are human stories. They're about people you never hear about.
Right.
So somewhere, one of the stories that stuck with me from the book was the original story that inspired the movie Gadar.
Okay.
The real now Gadar of course became one Hindi commercial film with Sunny Deol picking up water pumps and hitting people.
Right.
The real story is quite tragic.
Okay.
Because he married this woman and then she went back to Pakistan and then her family didn't let her come and he died heartbroken on the border.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that story, and Freedom at Midnight is full of a million such stories.
Okay.
All about partition, all about independence, the time before, the time after, the politics that went into it.
So these are all real stories in the book?
It's a complete...
Real accounts?
It's real. Everything is researched meticulously.
Okay.
So it's
That's
fascinating.
the beauty about history, right? There can be so many books on the same topic, but there'll still be so many perspectives and versions to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sounds fascinating. I think every Indian should probably pick up this.
I think any person who has no interest in history or no interest in India will also love this book because of the way it's written.
Okay.
It's spellbinding.
Right.
As a fiction writer, if I could accomplish 40% of what these books do, I'd feel like I'm gifted.
Okay, wow.
Wow. Yeah, the book also puts Gandhi in a very beautiful light, right?
It puts everyone.
Yeah.
It's very interesting how they've brought out Jinnah.
Yeah,
for us, we keep looking at Jinnah as, the bad guy.
The bad guy, right.
And that's not true. There's so much more to him. There's so much more to Nehru. We see only one facet of these guys, For us, you put them on a pedestal, on a statue, and say Bapu or Panditji.
Correct.
But they're people.
Yeah.
They're people with frailties. They're people with
human flaws.
Failings, human flaws. Yeah. And you understand why they did this or why they pushed for a particular thing.
Right.
They're also really intelligent people. Like if you see Ravan or you see Hitler or you see
Absolutely.
Jinnah, they have really like sharp minds, which is why they could pull off whatever they did. They just used it in a negative direction.
No,
But
and the beauty of it is that we've been programmed to think this is negative and this is right
positive.
or wrong.
right.
But it's all from where you're standing.
Yeah.
From a different perspective.
From the other side of the
Yeah.
border.
It makes perfect sense.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the interesting thing, that that here you can actually take yourself out of where your position is and see this and say, oh, okay. It does make sense from a point of view.
Even from the other person's point of view. Yeah.
So
Great.
that's also very fascinating.
Fascinating. So the next book we're moving on to is O Jerusalem by the same authors.
So that what happened is, once I read this,
You wanted to read-
I went through everything they read. So there was Is Paris Burning, and there was all that. But
Right.
this one, again, now, when I didn't know anything about Israel.
Right.
I didn't know. I mean, you hear about PLO and you hear about Israel, and again, it's a conflict situation like we spoke.
Yeah.
Who's right, who's wrong, these are the villains,
Correct.
these are the bad guys.
yeah.
But then when you read this book, it's again stunning because there's so many facets.
Right.
So you understand. Yeah, okay. I mean, at the surface of it, it's very clear. Oh, the Jews were being exterminated and then they found a land of their own and then they came.
Right.
And of course, the Arabs didn't want it and this and that. But there's so many perspectives. And again, no one's right or wrong. And again, so many small, like the descriptions of the battles that happen after Israel was formed, and then there was the 5-day war and all. How each aspect, like, and some of them are like, you actually, like, even now I've got chills down my spine when I think about it. Like, you have people sitting there fighting that battle against three armies, and they actually don't have enough guns. So they're 3 soldiers who are sharing the same gun.
Oh my God.
And there's actually one point, it says like, what do we do when the bullets run out?
Right.
And this guy says, okay, but thankfully all the trees are in bloom. We will pick up oranges and throw them at the enemy.
Real,
And these are real stories.
True story.
These are actual things
The
that
real
have
situation
happened.
was
Real
like that.
situation.
Yeah.
This is
Wow.
how those wars were fought. This is how...
It's fascinating.
I mean,
Yeah.
we even in our history books or wherever we never get to hear the minute details, right?
No, it's always a logic.
It's always that this
in
army fought this army and
1526,
this
they
army
fought,
won.
this
right?
one won.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's so much more than one.
Because it's a human
It's like
army,
where,
right?
what was
Each human-
Egypt? What was Egypt going through? What was Syria going through?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's also very illuminating because none of these crises have got resolved.
Right.
Whether you're talking about Indo-Pakistan or we're talking about Israel and the Arab states,
Yeah, it's
they
ongoing.
continue today.
Right.
So
Exactly.
when you go through a book like this, it gives you a perspective to understand what's going
How
on.
we reached here.
How we
Yeah.
reached here.
Yeah.
And honestly, you can't resolve any of this by saying this is black, this is white, he's good, he's bad.
Yeah.
Right.
It's complicated.
It's very complicated. Yeah, many facets.
Many facets
to the story.
and
right?
actually some of these things aren't going to ever get resolved.
Yeah.
So you just need to understand the human stories and maybe you just feel bad.
get a better understanding of why it's happening.
True.
Yeah.
Right.
So what's your take on Homodeus and Sapiens? Because they are also books on evolution of mankind. So
True. So Sapiens is on my list.
Okay.
Okay, so I did get the book last year.
okay.
And I started reading it and it was fascinating. And then work and life and
got caught up.
Right.
everything just came up. And so it's just sitting on my iPad.
Okay.
And one of the books I need to get back to this year.
Because what you said about these earlier 2 books strikes a very similar chord with
Yeah.
what
True.
Sapiens and
Absolutely.
Homodeus, even 21 questions.
Which is why it's so fascinating.
Yeah,
When you're
yeah.
reading
Just
it and you
puts
understand
the data in a new light or new perspective in your
Totally.
own mind, gives you a whole new understanding.
In fact, it's stunning that how many people in my line of work last year were all reading Sapiens. You'd go to a coffee
Yeah.
shop
Exactly
to
right.
work and 3 of
That's
them were
true.
sitting and you're like, हाँ मैं लिख रहा था, now I'm taking a break, क्या पढ़ रहा है Sapiens? You must read this book. And you're like,
It's unbelievable. We had the chance to meet Yuval Noah Harari when he had come
Right.
down to India. So we were at the press briefing, and one of the questions people asked him, the press asked him, is that would you consider yourself a guru? A modern age guru. And he said the answer he gave was most fascinating. Was that the danger to that is people may start believing what I'm saying is true, and even bigger danger is that I'll start believing in myself.
isn't that what happens in our country
Exactly.
all the time?
All the time, right? With all the gurus. Anyway, so we're moving on to the next book is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. We've already discussed this book on a podcast before, and it's fascinating that how many people want to discuss
Yeah.
it.
No, so
Yeah.
for me, this book, I picked up this book when I was in college.
Uh-huh.
And college is a pretty hard time.
Right.
You're struggling with self-image, you're struggling with inadequacy, you're feeling not good enough.
Yeah.
And then this book popped in.
Okay.
And in fact, it was very interesting how this book came also. This is a girl I thought I had a crush on, and I told her, and she was like, listen, nobody, we're just going to be friends, and you've got a lot of issues to work on, but read this book.
Oh, wow.
That's exactly how it happened.
Oh, wow.
That's a
And
new
the book
type
was
of
awesome. Yeah, it's a new type of
breakup. Yeah. Here, there's a book recommendation.
That's very interesting.
No, but that book was phenomenal because it completely changed the way I was thinking. Just the thought that, you keep looking at the problem as being out there.
Right.
Yeah.
And you just start realizing that no, everything begins and ends with me. That's so empowering and so liberating. And for me, that was the turnaround.
That's the paradigm shift in thinking that the book
Completely.
literally talks about. When you start taking responsibility for all your actions.
And for me, for quite a period of time, he became a guru.
Okay.
In the sense that, I was blindly following
So
the
you
book.
practice
Then you
a few of the habits.
Yeah, all of them. For
all
a while.
of them. Yeah.
But then you evolve and then you find your own ways within them.
Right.
Absolutely.
Initially,
It gives you a direction at least.
A base
That's what,
to start
Exactly.
off. And then you evolve into whatever works for you, right? Because
Because initially you're also starting from a very reactive, I don't know what to do.
Exactly.
You tell me what to do, I will blindly follow.
Right.
And then as you follow, you start thinking, no, I have a mind of my own. I'm the answer.
Right.
So I'll use this the way I want to.
Right.
But that's the most amazing thing about books, that everybody can have a, different takeaway from the book, and it affects them differently.
Completely.
So, yeah, absolutely.
So the last book that we're going to talk about is The Other Guy Blinked by Jesse Kornbluth and Roger Enrico. This book is about the Cola Wars, right?
Yeah. Okay, so how this book happened was actually my father was reading this book.
Okay.
And I was lying around.
Okay.
And I was bored. And I just picked it up. And next thing I knew, I was reading it. So I picked it up around the time, I think Coke had already... No, Pepsi had come into India.
Okay.
Coke hadn't yet come.
Okay.
And I was at that time a Coke loyalist.
Okay.
So I was like, when is Coke going to come?
Yeah.
And this book, this thing, and I started reading, and it's crazy because the things that this book, once again, fascinating stories. The fact that when Pepsi was a fledgling company, Coke could have bought them over.
Right.
Yeah.
But they said, such a small company, why should we bother?
Right.
Let it be.
Let it go.
Yeah.
So stuff like that. Or the taste test that they did, they put the blindfolded test. You drink two things and you decide which one you like, and people preferred Pepsi, and that's when Coke panicked.
Right.
And then they messed with their formula.
Right.
And introduced the new Coke, which people hated. And then they tried to push Coke. So, it's that exactly the other guy blinked.
Right.
You're the market leader. You're doing everything right. You just got nervous.
Yeah.
And reacted
and you changed from where you were.
Right.
And suddenly, you were nowhere.
And you have a competitor.
And you have to come back.
Right.
And your competitor has gone ahead of you because you got nervous.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The key, for me, one of the key learnings in the book is that, look, you are who you are. You stay true.
To yourself.
Stop looking at, and in a way it certainly connects with what we were talking about, 7 habits, because that's also talking about who you are.
Right.
Yeah.
Stop looking at other people and comparing, and
Yeah.
it
You're
doesn't
your
work.
own person, like you're your own company. You should
And you
define-
get lost in that.
Be Coke.
Totally.
Even the minute you're trying to be Pepsi, you're dead because there is Pepsi.
There is Pepsi
Yeah.
already.
So, and we get that in our line of work a lot. People say, oh, this has worked.
Right.
Stree has worked. Let's
Right.
make another Stree. And
Right.
you're like, but boss, Stree ban gaya.
Yeah.
What's
I
next?
can't do Stree. Please understand, Stree worked because somebody believed in that and made it.
Right.
Or Badai ho, somebody believed in that.
Yeah.
Today, if we go Me Too, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
You've got to do what you be yourself. You write your. Maybe for me it's Natasha Mehra Must Die.
Yeah.
I can't sit and write. Like I wouldn't be able to write Freedom at Midnight.
Yeah.
That's not me.
You need to know your strengths and work on
and play
those.
on that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and it was great fun. The book's again beautifully written and it's so much fun and very illuminating.
You get to really see. I mean,
You get to see the Cola Wars.
we saw
And
it while growing
cutthroat
up, right?
competition.
Yeah.
We saw the Cola
Yeah, we
Wars
saw a
going on.
different version of the
different
Cola Wars
version
here.
going on.
And the
India,
funniest
right?
part was thumbs up one.
Thumbs up.
It wasn't Coke or
It was-
Pepsi, it was thumbs up
thumbs
that
up.
one.
They must be like, y'all continue fighting.
I'll take the market share.
I'll take the market share.
No, that's again very interesting. So when that whole Cola War happened, that is the interesting thing because in America it was about sweetness.
Right.
In India it was about that kick.
The kick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's so different.
It's
Markets
different.
are
The
so
markets
different.
are-
People are so
Right.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What they're looking for.
Fascinating. So is there any one author or any one book that you go back to all the time that you would suggest?
Authors, definitely, like growing up, my favorite authors were Alistair MacLean, P.G. Wodehouse, Dick Francis.
Yeah.
Later in life, it was Stephen King.
Okay.
Like, I admire Stephen King to no end because of the range of stuff that he does. I mean, people think he writes horror, but there's so much more.
Yeah.
There's drama. Like, It is a saga. It's much more than just horror. It's like a coming of age. It's growing up. It's over a span of 40 years. It's mammoth. It's an epic.
Right.
Yeah.
And he writes every day, maybe 2,000 words, maybe
Wow.
20,000 words.
Wow.
He's written so many, and he's inventive. He's just come out with the new thing of small fiction, short fiction. I mean, this guy is unbelievable. So I can keep
He's
saying
a market
that.
leader. He's not blinking.
And he's brilliant.
Right.
You know, and he's hardworking. And he's come up from nothing. This is a guy who was an alcoholic or drug addict, and he's picked him up from there and come to this.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's an inspiring story on his own.
For anyone, right?
For anyone. It's not just about
a
writing.
comeback story. Like.
Even Bukowski was like that. Like, he was totally, drunk all the time and all. But his work is brilliant. So, yeah.
So I would say that, for most writers, the key thing, just shut up and write every day.
Yeah. So
That's
that's
the
your
only thing
tip
that
to
works.
writers, that they should
That's the way-
write something every day.
Yeah. That was the turning point for me. And that's the only thing that works. Make a discipline. You could write rubbish. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Keep writing. And the second thing is don't edit.
Yeah.
Keep writing, go to the end, come back and revise. Because the minute you start going backwards,
You're
never going to go forward.
Right.
You'll get
Correct.
stuck there forever.
That's a
Yeah.
great tip.
You should
I
just
think
make
just get
one
the first draft
framework.
out.
Yeah.
Get the first draft out of the way.
Yeah. And then you can continue to work on it, right? We
For
always-
life. But just get
This is great advice. It translates to life also, right? In
Yeah.
when we start companies or when we do products, it's like don't strive for perfection in the first shot. You can improve,
Perfection
right?
is a myth.
It's a
myth.
Doesn't
It
doesn't exist.
We are
Yeah.
not perfect. We are
We are flawed.
works in progress
Yeah,
our
yeah,
entire
yeah.
life.
Right.
And we
Yeah.
think we can create perfection. Nahi hone wala hai, boss.
Right. Fascinating. So thank you, Anand Sivakumaran, for being with us today and sharing your insights on these books. We look forward to having you on our show again. And a big thank you to all our listeners. You can follow the Open Library Project on LinkedIn, Instagram and Facebook for latest updates on our events, and stay tuned for the next Paperback podcast on IVM Podcasts. Happy reading. You can follow IVM Podcast on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at IVM Podcasts. You can follow Anand Sivakumaran's stories on the Croxtales podcast, available on the IVM Podcast app, website or wherever you listen to podcasts. New episode out every Monday and Thursday.
Advertising is dead. Yep, you heard me right. Advertising is dead. We're all in the content business now. Let's not call it news, TV, radio, etc., etc. It's all content, and we're in the middle of this weirdly exciting phase where all the borders and lines that have been drawn over decades has been swept away by this lovely thing called the internet. We're a show where we don't dwell on just the stuff that is now, but rather the wider stuff about advertising, media, content, and the whole goddamn circus surrounding it. Tune in every Tuesday for our weekly unboxing of the mystery box we used to call advertising. I'm Varun Dugirala, co-founder and content chief at The Glitch, and this is my new podcast, Advertising is Dead.
Hey Meghnad, do you know how to citizen?
Hey Shreyas, do you know how to citizen?
Hey Meghnad, do you know how to citizen?
Hey Shreyas, let's just do a podcast about it.
Let's do a podcast about it. A podcast is called How to Citizen. In every episode, we get a new guest and discuss one chapter from the 8th grade civics textbook. Think about it as three friends revising before a test, and we go back to school. There's nostalgia, there's trauma, there are lunch breaks, there are favorite teachers, there are horrible teachers, there's everything.
So every Tuesday we bring in a guest on the podcast and we ask them a very simple question. Do you know how to citizen?
Meghnad, I think the question is, do you know how to citizen?
But Shreyas, I'm asking you this question.